cultural heritage brands in India. It's not the first time I might be moderating a subject like this. And so once I have introduced my panelists, that's going to be my first question on what are we really building. So let me start in order of seating. David Abraham, one half of Abraham and Thakur, creative director, one of the founding imaginaries of how contemporary fashion should look, feel, be photographed, and worn. Thank you, David, for again being on one of my panels. Suket Dheer might be tired of being introduced as somebody who was discovered by the Woolmark Prize win, but let me start from one of the inner linings of the jackets that he creates. And they have these whimsical ideas, monkeys, strange birds, mangoes, sometimes ripe, sometimes raw. And then, of course, there is this merging of several techniques that take Suket's work from Telangana to Rajasthan. He weaves ikat on wool. And so if Woolmark Prize hadn't discovered him, I was wondering how this industry might have. So that's Suket Dheer for you. Rahul Mishra, I will not use a cliche, still needs an introduction. I could have said needs no introduction. Rahul is my neighbor, he's my colleague. We work in the same office, he works on the ground floor and I sit literally on his head on the third floor. I find myself enriched by the work, the conversations, the textures, the birds, beasts, flora and fauna that Rahul brings to the idea of the ornamental imagination, the embroideries, and his enduring arguments on sustainability. And I'm not saying Woolmark here, so we'll let that be. And the lady in dark blue as well, Asha Kamal Modi, founded a brand called Art Carrot in 1988, approximately 35 years back, I would say. That was a time when rightly your profile says, I did diligently read it, the word designer jewelry was still kind of in its mix. We didn't know what it was. Magazines like, even I was a young girl then, and magazines like Femina and others would make that idea very aspirational, that you don't just go to a Tribhuvan Das Zaveri to buy your jewelry. There is an art carrot that could be in your life. So thank you. And Supriya, I was just teasing the audience earlier to say cultural heritage brands in India, thanking the MC for introducing me, building cultural heritage brands. So my question is that what are we building? Haven't we built the idea of cultural heritage into Indian brands already? What is not culturally heritage, whether it is hotels, whether they are block printed napkins, whether they are fashion brands? So what is left to build? David, if I could invite you to open this with that.
Yeah, this is working. Hello, everybody. In response to your question, I think there still is quite a lot that needs to be built into Indian heritage brands because our history is relatively recent. It's, just over 70 years old. And our history as an industrial nation, as producers and manufacturers, is also relatively, especially in the contemporary economic sense. So new brands are being born in India all the time. And the market is exploding, as we all know, in India. So I think this is a very useful conversation to have because we are beginning to find that in a marketplace which is flooded with international brands, it's very important for Indian brands to define their identity and to find ways to make themselves stand out in the marketplace today.
Rahul, I'll come to you, and a part of the question then to Suket. When we define cultural heritage, we understand it obviously as something we inherited, but as a collective community, as a nation, as a people, and it links the past with the future. So the present moment becomes pulsating. But how important is the word heritage in culture in your work?
I think Personally, for me, is I always like it's also kind of seeking discovery, seeking some answers within yourself. I often ask this kind of thing a lot of times, like on different forums. Like if I just share recently, uh, not just for Indian context, even in terms of global context also, when you look at some of the mega brands, super brands out there into fashion landscape, when you look at French brands or Italian brands, the way they have carried forward their culture and all that, but how do you create something which looks like it has got some connection from heritage, but at the same time something which is very very universal? Because I think adaptability and acceptability becomes really key for a brand to thrive. Then we create something new, but also I really feel like it becomes equally important not to just tide away with the idea of heritage and also flourish to become a more like a, the palette has to be truly global in the same way.
Yeah. Suket, before I come to you, Asha ji, what does your customer want in terms of culture and how are you providing it?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, that's fine.
I always thought in my jewelry from the beginning of my career, only heritage, only tradition, only India. There was no other thing in my mind. Maybe because I was born in the times when I could only think about my roots. And fortunately, today I realize that what I am doing is the need for my country as well as what we can give it to the abroad, to the other countries. Because over the time I've learned that we have such a strong heritage background, such a strong cultural background. In fact, jewelry is one thing which is like part of our life, in our culture. And in my own way, I have developed and modified and made it more contemporary so that it can be worn today and it can be worn further with all kind of outfits. So I think it is there all the time and I can promote it.
As heritage or as modern or as
Both.
contemporary?
It's a combination of heritage and modern because if I'm not going to modernize it, I can't make the people wear it today. With their outfits, with their style of life and the way they go about, it is not the same as it used to be. So I have to modernize, I have to make it more contemporary, I have to use the different kind of color palettes and everything so that it is adapted world over. But I still have the designs which are rooted in my Indian heritage.
Suket, as a writer and journalist, it's your work that has actually alerted me to the idea, and of course the idea is bigger than me or you, is that culture is not just ours, but it can be interpreted individually in ways that lighten you up, that sparkle you. So who does the monkey belong to the world and then to India in a format, or the elephant, or the flower? How have you brought in that sense of personal history and whimsy into what actually can be seen as cultural motifs in your work?
I, when you look at Indian, when we're using the word heritage, I like to sort of unpack that a little bit before we get to the monkeys or the little whimsy. Um, as soon as we look at heritage and you look at India as a nation state, we are 70 years old. But as a civilization, this is the oldest continuous civilization on the planet. Um, so coming from that place, so many things that are being uh, rediscovered, reinterpreted, reshown. And there are so many things which are 3,000 years old, 4,000 years old, 5,000 years old, and they become a part of human heritage. I don't see them as Indian heritage alone. Because if you can see other civilizations at the
Absolutely.
moment,
Yeah.
their heritage or their culture is probably 500, 600 years old, maybe maximum it goes up to 2,000 years old. All the older civilizations have not survived or not survived substantially. Maybe in token, you'll see some Aborigines in Australia and some natives in America. But the way an old civilization survives, you can only and only find that in this part of the world. So that becomes a human heritage aspect. And that's where I think UNESCO comes in, all these world heritage sites come in. That's where you start looking at our own culture. And what is common between, say now these are civilizational aspects, Western civilization, Indian civilization. But what's common between is the human experience. So Dada, Dadi, everybody has grandparents, whether it's West or here. They might not live with their grandparents, but everybody knows their grandparents. And grandparents, the way they treat their children is the same here and is the same there. 70, 80 years back, they used to have unified families. The nuclear family system that you see in the West is fairly new. And as soon as you talk about these things in your stories, it does evoke a certain kind of emotion everywhere. So that is what a monkey does over here. The monkey will do exactly the same thing to a child or to a person sitting anywhere else in the world. So it connects people. So heritage becomes, for me, heritage is not something that I think of when I'm designing. It's a part of my DNA. A lot of our previous generations almost perceived westernizing as modernizing. I think that is one thing we can actually learn from the Japanese, that, modernizing is modernizing. Westernizing doesn't mean modernizing. So all of those things, when you connect them, you can actually sort of see where things are going.
Rahul, your most recent collection at Paris Couture Week was called We the People. People who you work with, people who wear you, are with you. But these conversations that we have often belong to those who went to colleges, probably English language institutes, and cultural heritage becomes an almost elitist idea. The question I want to ask you is, how does your karigar see cultural heritage? Is there any conversation that you have saying, आपने क्या सीखा, आपने ज़रूर सोचा होगा, आपने क्या बचाया? Is there any conversation that comes towards heritage or culture, और वो कड़ियाँ कहीं जुड़ती हैं?
I think I must share this with you. Whenever we are doing a new collection with a team, it's the most exciting time, which kind of unifies everybody. The new idea, new thought process. Or same happened with this collection also. Actually, somehow whatever we do, in real sense, all our hard work, everything, even for a karigar, the biggest motivation is what he aspires to do. How much that thing, apart from satisfying him as an artist, how much that thing can give a proper monetary gain for him, so that he can look at his aspirations or his thought process. Like for example, if I give you one example, like one of the most senior karigars, Afzal Zariwala, who was there in Paris also with me. Although we got his passport done for the first time, got first visa stamp, but he sent his daughter to study in UK. Like right now she's studying over there. So for me, more than just looking at heritage alone, the power of fashion or craft, which you unlock by, because I am sure every parent's dream, whether they are super rich or they come from humble background, their dream is to be able to send their children to study wherever they can, wherever they can afford.
Are you saying that unlocking the dream and empowering them with education, opportunity, and thus money and a future is the way of holding on to cultural heritage?
Yes, absolutely. For me, if you make a craftsman or an embroiderer or maybe a master weaver, give him national awards, but he's struggling. You go to villages, they all are struggling right now. There's no point of making him patron of, or maybe savior of heritage of India. Heritage can lie like anywhere in the world in a museum, no problem. I think any occupation should pay good, pay well, so that they can live their dream, they can take care of their families, and this is their basic right. So according to me, I'm again sharing this with you. A lot of weaving clusters across India, they are still, the payments are less than 10,000 rupees a month.
I know,
they
yes.
are like 100 rupees a day, which people are getting paid over there to do handloom weaving. I do not know what heritage are we trying to say.
Master craftsmen also get 18 to 28,000 rupees.
Yeah, I really feel it's better to move on and try to find better employment opportunities for them. And this becomes a collective responsibility, not for the government, but even for the entrepreneurs, to be able to find better ways for them so that they can fulfill, who can fulfill anything in their life at mere 3,000 rupees a month, and by working 8 hours every day, entire month.
So there is a opportunity and human rights issue coiled here, and you raised an important point for me to swerve away from my initial thought, dump it, and go to David to ask. Then, if designers and entrepreneurs or brand holders like yourselves must also be welfare officers, as they should be a part of the work, but the burden of design then is more on you, on designers, than it's on the craftsperson, the burden of design itself. And you, two of you went to NID. So the design that you create, the ikat pattern that is broader and bigger than one has ever seen on a garment has been created by A&T, or the interventions that you bring. Would it be okay to say that if you just gave the craftsperson money, opportunity, future, and education in UK, the design burden on you, can you handle it alone without the artisan's eye, craft, hand, health?
You know, I think designers in India, I can talk about textile and fashion. I can't talk about other areas. Of course, there are many, many fields of design. But in fashion and textiles, I think the synergy between the maker or the craftsperson and the designer is key to the product. I think a bit like what Rahul was also saying, the embroidery person does, interprets his ideas. The designer, and the designer in our context, in the Indian context, is developing a design language and which articulates our heritage. In all cases, I think that's very much a part of what we do because we are informed by it. That's our language. This is our environment. This is where we grew up. This is what we study. This is what we eat. This is what we see. So we are using the craftsperson skills and to diversify the language. So I think the interdependence is crucial. I don't think you can take one away from the other. I think it's also very important because this also addresses a particular need of the craft industry, is that design intervention is crucial.
Absolutely.
Because you cannot just be a maker. You have to also have these. So this is the responsibility of the designer, to bring those ideas, why extend the vocabulary of design, you working with the craftsperson. So I see them both as interrelated.
Asha ji, what would you, can you give us and the audience a few examples of ornaments that, I particularly suffer a lot from trying to explain to myself or our readers what is traditional and contemporary. Why do they have to be both at the same time? Can you give an example of an ornament of a chudi or a gale ka haar, kaan ke, जो traditional भी हैं और फिर modern भी हैं? और क्या ज़रूरी है for them to be these both to be culturally apt and created from India?
जैसे for example हमारे यहाँ चोकर होता है, which is can be a choker in any country in any form, right? And उसको चिंतक भी बोलते हैं. जैसे गुट्टा पुसलू होता है, which is from Hyderabad, and we have so like payal, bichya, kamarband, belt. So these necklaces, of course, of different forms, long necklaces and bangles of different kind, bracelets, loose bracelets, tennis bracelets which are coming in, and the mang tikas and all those different earrings, all the jewelry, it can be of any culture. I'm not saying that we are stuck to only our own this thing, but the influence of our culture invariably comes in, because India is one country which is very strong on jewelry.
But how do you modernize a piece?
नहीं, modernize जब हम करते हैं, जैसे पहले जब jewelry बनती थी, it used to be very heavy. Today, if I have to make a choker, I will think of the weight also, and I will also think of the style to modernize a bit. Modernize, when I say modernize, is more adaptable to today's times. It doesn't mean the changing of the basics. Choker to choker ही है, but we are putting those kind of colors, those kind of styles which can be worn with dress as well as sari, and which is more versatile for a young woman as well as little elder one. So these are the things which we keep on adapting with the times, and it makes it very easy for all the people, wherever they are, to wear this jewelry more appropriately.
Since we are talking about cultural heritage, Suket, do you remind yourself when you are designing of your roots? Do you consciously remember your Indian and that there is an Andhra in your life, and then there is a Rajasthan, and there is a Bandhani? Are these thoughts embedded and forgotten, or you have to remind yourself that this is my matrix?
I think instinctively, I remember initially, I would say initially it was a bit of a struggle. I had to actually do the opposite. वो heritage इतना part है, how to modernize it more was the need, because market needs and market demands tell you to go towards wedding wear, and I was pushing and pushing against it. I need to make something that I can wear myself, and that's how I launched the menswear brand many moons ago, and we segued into women's wear 4 years back, but now the thing is, heritage is incidentally a part. It's something that happens automatically. I don't have to think about it. For example, the brocade suits that we started doing a few years back, with our own little twists and turns. Even there, I mean, I was, I shouldn't say this, but I was bored of the brocade, seeing at home and seeing them everywhere. And so when I saw the yardage of brocade, I was like, what next? What do I do with it? And it was a plain brocade fabric. It is beautiful, nonetheless. But you know, as a creative, you do get bored seeing things. So what next was what made me do what I did with the brocade suit. It looks very different from, it is a brocade at the end of the day, but it looks very different from the traditional brocade also. So you picked up the right thing. Is that in my case, it was the opposite. I had to actually sort of always remind myself that I need to make something contemporary, because India will happen automatically. I mean, I'm too
Exactly.
Indian
All of us
for
in
it,
some
for
form.
it to not happen.
Yeah. So you brought up the word wedding and opened the door for me. I was waiting to bring it up myself because it's an inescapable part of the fact that we should discuss fashion, jewelry, and not discuss the wedding. And David, recently, not very recently, a few months back, we had this conversation and we said that the photography and the beaming out of the Indian wedding is so regressive. You know, women are still wearing whatever they are wearing and hundreds of jewels and lehengas and all that. Now, this regressive idea, of course, some will say that the cleavage can be seen and the navel, belly button can be seen, or lehenga chota ho gaya, bada ho gaya. Essentially, there is a cliche, trapped thing that's going on and on and on. Is this cultural in some form? Who takes the burden of this? And you also at that time pointed out rightfully about the corset and the high heel. I'm not sure if you remember this conversation. I quickly went back to my team and said, "Bhai, story karte hain. Do stilettos still sell or not?" And actually, they sell less. But for the Indian wedding, the campaign, the bridal images that come out to us, I also read them as regressive. Why do we think so?
I don't know. I think that's really, I mean, it's a challenge. It's a challenge because, on the one hand, we are, as a society, emancipating, especially, I mean, I think at one level of society, emancipation, female emancipation has progressed enormously. Yet, on another level, old patriarchal notions have been getting reinforced. And I don't have the answer because I know a lot of very empowered women who are very happy, who see this as a sign of assertion that they can adopt these patriarchal, like the corset, the stiletto heel, the dress, a woman dressing as the helpless bride with her head covered, her eyes covered, in the presence of a man, as being somehow something they can do perhaps with irony. But I still think, to me, in that as I mean, as for the conversation we had, it still is regressive. It's just, and it is becoming, I think, even more entrenched in fashion, particularly. I think, of the way a woman is portrayed and highly sexualized. And it's a very interesting subject, but I really have no.
I mean,
I
it's,
don't know why
it's
it
cultural
it does-
heritage, so I'm trying to
Yeah.
play on it for a while and ask other panelists the same question. Since that's where the biggest money, I'm told, comes from wedding wear. But each of you are also trying to kind of move away, tweak away, challenge it in your own ways, till perhaps the commerce takes over and you give the bride what she wants. Sometimes she wants a choli that is so small that it makes us, then we are forced to write about it as modern bride. I'm not sure if the choli is modern or the bride is modern. I think the choli is and the bride is not. But what do you think, Rahul?
I think I look at, like, especially for the weddings, I look at it very, very differently. Like the amount of employment it generates for the people who are working for the industry. And some of you are so lucky in this times where, for entire life, like if you look at like the way we all are dressed today, whether we like it or not, it might be modern or it might be Western, whatever you call it. We are definitely not dressing the way Indians would dress historically, but weddings still do carry a bit of heritage. Weddings do carry that kind of vibe, which also creates so much of. I'm not complaining. Like it creates a lot of business, a lot of commerce, a lot of people who are working. A lot of craftsmen, a lot of embroiderers, and I'm sure about it. Like a lot of brocade, a lot of handloom. Everything is supported because of wedding industry as per se, or
But is
weddings
that
which are,
idea regressive to you?
you know uh, obviously, like you know if I say in real sense nowadays, like in last 10 years of time, how it has changed, although this is the personal choice what they're wearing. I'm not going to comment about how they're feeling about it, but for sure I can tell you now, these young girls who really come, and sometimes we get to meet them also, they're extremely powerful with the choices. They are making choices for everybody in the family, including
About
the
clothes,
in-laws. Yeah,
about
about
what
clothes.
they'll wear.
Not they will wear, what anybody else is going to wear in the
Yeah,
wedding.
I mean, what they'll
They are
wear.
deciding about everything about their family. I think the time is gone when actually 10 years back, 15 years back, they will say, oh, your in-laws are like that, they want it in a certain way, they want it in a certain way. No, nothing. They like it. They have been dreaming of this day. They want it to be. They want to look like in certain way. We've got brides. They walk in with a complete mood board, with a full research, almost like that kind of research would take years
But
of
they're
like
still
putting
playing
together.
out the same formula and the theater that runs. The theatrical script is the same.
Yeah, that's how I think that's how they got conditioned since the beginning, and that is what the power of. Sometimes I will always say, what is minimalism? Minimalism is nothing else, it conditioning of our mind to start believing whatever industrial or industries could produce. Hundreds of times we just got conditioned by thinking less is more, minimal, because you go to any part of the world, any oldest stuff, like you go to any oldest heritage buildings or anywhere, everywhere, even the sword that was made in Japan was completely maximalist. It has details, like crazy amount of detail, anywhere in the world. But somehow, just because industrialization, wherever countries, big people who were running the industries, they conditioned all of us to start believing the minimal of what we are wearing is the coolest thing. And this was the modern thing because that's what factories could make always. So, this is a matter of conditioning. This is how I think all the Bollywood, everywhere, when a young girl, I'm sure, like, if my daughter who's like 7-year-old, Arna, the way she's influenced by mermaid and all that, this is not something which she got, maybe. That's how you see around, you look around, and that's what your dreams are always made of aspirations and experiences.
So the wedding industry does cater to dreams, I'm sure, there's no doubt. I'm not sure if it caters to the rebellious idea, and design can obviously cater to also making of the rebel. But Suket, since you won your famous Woolmark Prize for menswear, let me ask you, how much of this heritage and culture in clothes and fashion do men carry? And what are they really carrying?
Zero. Zilch. Um, I think, look at us. I mean, I'm still wearing a little bandi that represents maybe loosely Indian culture. I don't think it does. It's hot outside. I shouldn't be wearing this. It's hot outside, and then we blast ACs. We wear clothes for air conditioning. So that is how influenced we are from the West. And I don't blame people.
All three of you are wearing
Yes,
jackets.
I don't blame people. It's also practical. I'm hiding my handles and everything. So
And I'm told layered style is supposed to be cool.
no, I'm purely handling my hiding my fatness.
Conditioning.
But I'd say men are not. Men are, especially since the 80s, ever since the ready-made formula less is more thing was influenced, I think, enforced. I've seen my dad go to a tailor shop with the fabrics and get suits made. That doesn't happen anymore. I grew up again in a very tiny little town slash village, just like Rahul did. And while growing up, it was a normal thing. Even my school uniform used to be made by a tailor. We never went to a uniform shop to get my uniforms done. Now they are ready-made, ready sizes. As soon as you're done wearing them, you'll pass it on to your sibling, and you'll still do the passing on things. But you don't get to make things for your own fit, for your own size, for your own climate. And again, even there's a huge amount of dogma in textile. For example, our weavers, you want people to wear handloom on the 2nd of October and 15th of August.
And now I'm told on
Right.
7th of August as well for Handloom Day.
So those things are there. But then at the end of the day, we've not. So it was the weavers in collaboration with engineers 100 years back who invented looms, mechanized looms. It were the weavers themselves who did it. But at the same time, weavers in India did not shift gears enough to only weave things that are impossible to make on power looms and mills. And there are those weaves still existing. Rahul knows that we use those weaves.
So
We
why
only
do
invest
the
in those
male
weaves.
models on fashion ramps look like they've lost their mind? Or their or their blazer or something?
I don't want to shift the blame anywhere, but listen, there is a blame. The blame lies with one place, and I think that is one place that needs to fix itself, which is Bollywood. See, the thing is, my mother, you look at your mother's pictures when she was a bride, if you have those pictures, I have my mom's pictures. Yes, the color was important, yes, the jewelry was important, but they were not wearing a 20-kilo product. They were not. And they were wearing products that they could use another day.
So the male Bollywood stars, I'm still hung on the man story here. So the male Bollywood star is
Male Bollywood star is dressed like a Christmas tree, and
And
hence
is the female
all
Bollywood
the
star.
grooms of India are now dressed like a Christmas tree. You go to a South Indian wedding, it's a pleasure to watch. First of all, the wedding happens at 6 in the morning. And you will see, and I have a part of my family is South Indian. Svetlana is half South Indian. So I've got the pleasure to go to some of those Bengali weddings. And you see, first of all, the grooms are topless, okay? And then they're wearing dhotis and the angavastram, all of that is there. It's fun, it's nice. It's not, I mean, it's just something which pleases you. There's certain, it's practical for the climate. All those clothes that they wear, गर्मी होती है.
सुकेत सिर्फ फैशन के कपड़ों की बात होती तो I would agree with you, but cultural heritage being broader, a South Indian wedding has hundreds of spices, so many other things going on. There is a maximalist pressure on the cultural idea of the wedding anyway, one way or the other.
Jewelry. And they are looking more like North Indian weddings, by the way.
They all want lehengas
The
as
sherwanis
well.
have also entered,
Thanks
yes.
to all Fashion Week designers
Bollywood.
of Bollywood. Okay, we can. आशा जी फिर से शादी की बात क्योंकि वो पूरी नहीं हुई थी. The brides who come to buy for you for their wedding, when they say does anybody say हमें छोटी पतली चीज़ चाहिए, हल्की चीज़ चाहिए? Because it seems on Instagram कि लोग बड़े से बड़ी चीज़ें पहन रहे हैं.
You're right. I have never imagined, even in my career, that it could come up to this level of the sizes of the jewelry, how much they want to wear, it's really amazing.
So where is this modernity? Meaning, is modernity perhaps not about size? I'm sure I've got it from the wrong tail. Perhaps there is some other modernity that is escaping us.
I don't know, only the girls who have been abroad or who have stayed there, from if suppose a bride comes from United Kingdom, she would say, yes, I want a simple necklace. Only those kind of girls. But even those girls, they are looking for the heaviest because they've been watching Bollywood so much, and all the brides in the movies. I mean, I think we should thank Bollywood for the business it gives us, because all the girls are looking to look like a film star. They have an image in their mind. They have the clothes all planned up, and heaviest of the clothes and heaviest of the jewelry possible. This is the dream of any bride.
And then we call them modern and traditional.
Modern traditional. I mean, it's, and even the vows, पूरा जो फेरे होने हैं, जो पूरी शादी की जो system है, जो रस्में हैं, they are very happy to perform that. They want to do it. It is very interesting.
Also, क्योंकि कई सारी jewelry items are associated with rituals that should have been buried to the ground.
Yeah.
पैर में बिच्छी पहनना,
मंगलसूत्र,
anklet, मंगलसूत्र, all those things on
Yeah.
the head and all. Then why do some designers sell their jewelry as contemporary? Can you help me understand what is contemporary here?
That is what I am saying, कि our heritage jewelry has become so popular that I don't know myself कि अब इसको हम शक्लें तो बस contemporary हम ये कर सकते हैं कि like we can add those different kind of stones in that or different color लेकिन most of the weddings are taking place in the afternoons. They are wearing pastel shades. So maybe the jewelry which was very different colors earlier, now we will look for those color of stones in the bridal jewelry which will accompany their bridal outfits in the afternoon. This is the only change. This is the only modernization. But the things are same, head to toe.
So cultural heritage is essentially the heavier stone is from the past. That's what defines, I would say, a majority of thought or not. But how do your international buyers, considering there is a resurgence of the idea of the rediscovery of India, what is the international buyer seeing in you that is clearly modern? All of you have flourishing brands and careers. People are buying from all over the world. What are they buying? They are not buying heritage. Or are they buying heritage that has been contemporized? And so what is contemporary? I want to come again to that.
International buyers, Rahul is a better person to talk about that, but for little experience that I have had, I think what they usually pick up on is the nuance and the intricacies of our culture.
Yes.
So, and what we actually end up focusing on is just the outer picture. But as soon as you tell a story, okay, so for example, the bichu and the Mangal Sutra and the Tika, there are meanings behind meanings behind meanings.
Yes.
But somehow the association, the Western gaze, and we've been looking at it again from a very Victorian lens for so long that we find them as patriarchal. We are talking about a culture where women wrote the Vedas. So women were very emancipated in this culture. We've only heard of one.
War is about right.
We have, or at least that's what we've known about. We've had Indira Gandhi. We've had many, many women just in last 20 years. And they're all in all walks of life. Indian women and Indian culture when it comes to women, I think it's very misunderstood also or misrepresented. Because I'll give you an example from my own personal example. My mum, as soon as she got married, the first day she came home, my grandmother, the first thing she asked my mother to do was not do the ghungat. And my grandmother removed her own ghungat. And my grandmother had 3 younger Devranis, my dad's chachis. All of them left ghungat. And the entire family gave a ghungat. Not a single man did a chew in the house.
Suket, if we were to talk of women's rights and emancipation in India, it would be a very different debate. And I could stack so many examples of wrongdoing, torture, injustice, anti-feminism that, we would go elsewhere.
Yeah. No, I'm saying wrongdoings do exist. But I'm saying that good things have happened. Good things are accepted in this culture. But the acceptance part is never talked about, is what I'm just
I'm not also
saying.
going into
I'm
the
just saying
good and
not,
bad.
wrong
I
is
mean,
not happening.
that would be a meritorious call, and I don't think I'm qualified to take that. I was merely asking that since most fashion and craft and design businesses cannot do without a global clientele, since you're all also on e-commerce. After all, anybody in the world can buy. What is that global consumer looking from you? That is heritage, cultural, and Indian. I'm sure Rahul can, of course, answer, and so can David. But Suket, when your clothes did. Okay, we are going to take the questions to the audience after this response.
International audience.
Do
I
you
think people
create
can
for
pick
them?
what.
Do
I
you
mean,
create for them in mind?
no, I mean, not anymore. I mean, I did initially in the beginning of our business, but now I don't because it doesn't figure. You see, also what's happening now is that the Indian market is so large. I think there are also a lot of people who don't really need to consider it. So that's one thing. But I do think that there's enough in design, Indian design, that has aspects that can appeal to tastes from all over the world as well as Indian. I think it's a matter of tweaking it. I think we'll all agree with
Absolutely.
that. You can either, as you say, lay it on layer and layer and layer and have as much excess as possible for a consumer here. As we're talking about the wedding, I mean, that's excessive ornamentation, which, I mean, I think answers a need in India for the Indian consumer who is now using this kind of consumerism to declare their identity, to tell people who they are, how much they earn, where their status has changed. So it's very important in that context. And there's enough we have for that. But there is also the other side of it, which is stripped down, minimal, which can also be extracted or can be used. But I do think that there is a difference between the two markets. There are overlaps, but there is also quite a strong cultural difference between the international, at least if I look at the West. When I say international, we tend to only talk about the West. In fact, we only tend to talk about the white West. We don't talk even about the colors. So we're using that lens, that has one particular aesthetic, and using our side of the world. But it's all getting very complicated now, because I think, as the pendulum is beginning to shift, and as the larger consumer markets are now beginning to, grow in this part of the world, we're all facing this sort of, all this questioning. We're coming out of our post-colonial sort of, arguments. We're beginning to evaluate all these ideas.
Building cultural heritage brands in India. Any questions from the audience? Can we invite? Please. Would you like to introduce yourself and?
My name is Audrey, and I had a question for all of you. Just wondering, because you guys do borrow on traditional craft skills and culture to have built your brands, but it's still very much, it's a luxury brand. It's a fairly niche sector that's catering to a certain kind of clientele who could support and be patrons to this and sustain this employment and the workforce that you guys work with. So I was just wondering, what does it take to, for example, share the burden, right, of sustaining a culture, put it on not just a few people, but on many people. Maybe think about like a mass brand, a Zara or an H&M, but that's built on the foundations of, or on the shoulders of, traditional Indian craft and that skill set. I don't know, what does it take to do that? And could you paint a picture
Your
for us?
question doesn't seem very clear because you brought in Zara. I lost. So are you saying how to
Like
scale?
a mass
How to
brand?
scale a cultural
Yes.
heritage brand? What does it take to scale something from India
Yes.
to the level of Zara and H&M? Is
Yes.
that the question?
Yes, thank
Rahul
you.
or Suket, could you?
I just have just this comment to make about this. Craft and mass can't go together. As soon as craft goes Fab India, you'll kill the craft. And we've seen that. We've seen the result of that in last 30, 40 years. The brand has done really well, but the craft has gone down. Weavers are trying to compete with power looms and mills. So I mentioned something a little while back. There are weaves that are impossible to weave on power looms and mills. Those are the weaves that need focus. Those are the weaves that even the plain weave weavers need to move towards. That's the only way. And India is well placed to become the luxury factory of the world.
They can't be scaled up.
We can, we can. It can be scaled up, and we can. India is well placed to be the luxury factory of the world. I think Rahul should.
Very interesting thing which I related to this only. There was a dinner with Mr. Henry Pino. Mr. Henry Pino owns Gucci, Balenciaga, Kering Group owner. So he had his observation. So we were conversing about it. He said, like we always give example of Japan, Japanese brands which are coming out of Japan. He said this, and very careful for all of us whosoever is trying to bring a brand or trying to start a brand out of India and all that, or who has a brand. He said that whatever it is, but Japanese brands have only limited to a few millions in turnover, few $1 million in turnover. Still, you can't find a single brand which is not truly global and doing a business of more than $1 billion. So you have to build a $1 billion brand. What it takes is you show your roots, like the way Dior is example, or Chanel is example, or Saint Laurent is example. You have very strong roots in French idea and all that. In the same way, I really feel you might have, when you come from India, you will have very strong roots out of India, but somehow you have to take that as a base. It's like a root. Roots of trees are often not visible beyond the ground. Then after the tree becomes very unique idea. That's how the whole thing can happen if you have to scale up. And I'm sure a $1 billion brand or even bigger than that, even Fab India for the example, because of the price factor they try to compete with, because of the pricing bracket they are into, they will never able to sell a handloom kurta for really long enough at 2,000 rupees. It means the weaver will not get sustainable wages also. Not even sustainable wages. You can't call them wages, what viewers get. So I really feel if it has to be scaled up, the scale up can only happen at the top of the level, luxury level. And I'm sure about it, again, if I say 50% of the couture pieces which are produced in the world, more than 50% produced in India. So when
They can't be scaled at the Zara kind, with
Yeah.
so many drops, so frequent, and so cheap.
and business volume wise, it's kind of bigger than Zara. I'm only surprised, but not in some piece volume wise.
I have an answer for that. When I started my career 35 years back, I started it in silver. Art Karat is a silver-based jewelry, and all the designs were in my mind from the museums or on the idols of the temples or whatever we saw at that time. I wanted to recreate on the lower level so that it could reach out to maximum people, because those kind of pieces in precious jewelry are so expensive that not many people can wear it. And least of all, the middle class or even the people who want to wear a lot of jewelry, they could not afford it. So anything which was like, let's say in precious would be like 10 lakhs of rupees, mine would come in maybe 10,000 rupees or something like 20,000 rupees. And beyond me now, whole of India is making another section of jewelry which is like, much, much cheaper, so that an average bride can be satisfied because she can get the similar designs on that level. So basically, what you say is the spreading out. I started with the spreading out in Art Karat, even though I do gold jewelry, but I presented Art Karat as a beautiful option to precious jewelry. And today, this is the reason I think my country has started doing so much of this kind of jewelry that we have a parallel economy with the precious jewelry and my kind of semi-precious jewelry, and even third and fourth kind of jewelry which has come up. And people are quite satisfied as far as this front is concerned.
We have 2.5 minutes. Any more question? There are two. If you could please bring the mic here.
Thank you. I'm Bandana Singh, and I'm the Vice President for Group 4, which is a British American company. Been working for about in a corporate sector for 35 years now. But designing clothes is my hobby. So I don't know what kind of hobby is that. But what I think about fashion, how I define is when you can style somebody to her height, her style, and what suits her best. And second is why India is, why people, so I work very closely with all the diplomatic missions for many, many years. And so, I mean, whatever you dress up, so what they get so intrigued about is, first is our fabric and second is the color. And second is the different pattern, because their styles or their patterns are very, very bland or could be straight. But ours, we come up with a lot of creations. I mean, you guys sitting there, you come up with different creations, you come up with different styles, and the kind of the fabric that we use, that's a lot of fabric, which gives so much of grace to a woman when she carries just a dupatta, when she carries with 2.5, 3 meters, that itself so feminine and pretty. So I guess that's what attracts them a lot.
So that's a comment.
That's a
yeah.
comment,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a question. We can take that as the last question before we wrap up. Yes, the mic is right here. If you can kindly.
So I imagine marketing is like a big part of the challenge that you have as brands that are trying to grow. Just wondering if you use culture or heritage or these kind of words in your positioning or your kind of materials, and how users potentially or customers think of these words. Is that something that resonates, or like what kind of connotations do people have in their mind when they hear these words?
Who would you like the question to be answered by?
Maybe Suket or David. I'm just guessing.
So if I'm using, for example, if I'm using the kasuti embroidery, as soon as I use kasuti or if I use ikat, I will automatically use these keywords. But if that is not what the product, or they are not the main feature of the product, then I'll talk about whatever the main feature of the product is. It's very subjective to individual product. We do use it, but to sell my brand in the brand language, I stick to good old artisanal rather than cultural or heritage. Yes.
Can I tell you how I read it as a journalist? You know, most of these, there are some obvious references and which they can use the word culture or heritage or India. But when they say ikat, it's also our problem as people who interpret to see where does that ikat belong to. So we should find whether it went to it came from Bali or Africa, or it's from India. And that's how I think some of these vocabularies are unpacked when you read a collection. I try to do that even when obvious words are not used, and invariably reach the cultural heritage there. You said there was another question. Yes, please. And that's going to be our last question because we have slightly overshot.
Yeah.
Please.
So I'm Rumpa, and I am kind of traditionally from Kolkata. Last 8 years, I'm settled in Mumbai. So I find a striking difference between these two cities. Kolkata is such a city which has hold on to the tradition. So while we perceive that like traditional clothes are very expensive, Kolkata is a city where you can get traditional clothes, saris especially, at a very like reasonable price. While now, like malls have become the place for shopping, in most of the malls when you walk in, like mostly in Mumbai where people have the money to buy, you don't have much options of traditional Indian clothes and fashion items, which I can go and buy. Suppose I'm in Mumbai, I've been struggling to get something of the Marathi culture, and I'm not getting in Mumbai. Last time I went to like Aurangabad, I could procure one like Paithani sari. So how do you make Indian fashion, Indian attires easily accessible to people who can afford and buy it? Mostly in metros like Bombay, Bangalore, where people have the money to buy, because malls usually have all the Zara, Levi's, and all this kind of foreign brands that people are buying those. Like in Kolkata, you have an entire marketing, like a mall which is only of state emporiums, like called like Dakshinapan, where you can walk in and you can buy any traditional item at affordable price.
Several aggregators like Adyam, Angadi, I can go on naming, also create Indian, and depends on what you're calling traditional. There's a lot of tradition tucked into what all of them do. But who would you like this question?
Yeah, all of your experts. So how do you want? How can you?
Well, I think they are available actually in the cities everywhere.
but they're very scattered and not so well promoted also. If somebody walks into a mall, you don't get those kind of things. Why can't?
Okay, so I think again, the thing is the scale thing. So only the brands that can actually churn up enough sales can afford the rentals to be in the malls. Now, as long as tradition is associated with regressive and not cool, it is going to be a very niche audience that are going to be buying it, and each one is looking for a discount. As soon as you look for a handloom, it's only those places people ask for discounts. People don't ask for discounts at Adidas or Reebok. So that's another thing and that's the reason why designers are the best promoters for heritage and textiles, because that's the only place people don't ask for, well, they do ask for discounts, but they don't get discounts. Everybody tries. I mean, that's an Indian thing to ask for discounts. I'm sorry. My bad.
No, it is true. It's true.
But that's the only place they don't get discounts.
And they ask from the cultural stakeholders a lot.
And the reason with this whole thing, and because it's not cool, and because the weaver has to sell, they will discount it, but then the quality suffers. And that is what we've seen. So, yes, Kolkata has places which is selling Jamdani saris. The similar Jamdani sari will sell in Banaras for ₹1,00,000, but in Kolkata it'll be half the price. Now, but the thing is, you don't know the reason. Because this is selling for half the price, the weavers in the villages who are weaving those saris are leaving. They don't want to weave those saris. It needs to sell for 2.5 lakhs for those weavers to ensure that the kids don't want to be engineers, they want to continue this weave. So that they can also travel to Paris just with their weaving money. But for that, you have to buy a 2.5 lakh sari, which means you have to come into terms with the fact that handloom and craft belongs in luxury. So everybody will not be able to afford it.
I can tell you off the stage, 10 names available in malls that sell traditional Indian this thing in cities. I can really, because I think it's a retail resurgence that's going on.
Shefali, one thing,
Yes.
just so that my statement is not misconstrued, we'll not be able to afford it for a while. So as soon as the weavers become a part of your mainstream middle class in another 10, 15, 20 years, many more people will be able to. So, in toto, the GDP needs to come up. The individual needs to make more money for them to be. For now, please don't ask the middle class to be able to afford handloom. It has to go to luxury.
It's good for the economy,
moment.
not for the middle class to afford the handloom. Sorry to say it in these words, but so parting shots, very quick, starting from David, ending with Asha ji. Cultural heritage, what does it mean to you?
Gosh, that's a very tough one. I think it's about finding a contemporary voice for everything that we have inherited. That's what it is.
I think we all need to discover the cool in our culture and heritage. We've been discussing the negatives for far too long. I think you also discover the cool things about our culture and heritage and promote those to beat the negatives and the regressive parts of those.
Rahul?
It's the same what you've been discussing.
Okay, he said many things, most importantly about the people, to bring people up through care and effort. Asha ji?
I think culture is evolving everywhere, and with our culture, we have to change according to the times. But there is a lot of scope, and India has a long way, and it is accepted beautifully all over the world.
Okay, I suppose the audience got something out of this session, and thank you, David, Suket, Rahul, and Asha ji. Thank you all. Bye.